Hello and welcome to a special bonus episode of Postcards from a Dying World. So this is going to be content that you would normally find on my other podcast, the Dickheads podcast, because I'm going to be talking about Philip K. Dick. But I kind of just did this one on a whim, so it's easier for me to put it up in my feed directly. But there's good stuff going on coming up soon. We haven't done a Dickheads episode in a long time, but we're going to be doing the Divine Invasion episodes soon, and we're going to have some big announcements about how we're going to be able to close out the Dickheads podcast a little bit faster than our progress has been. We have some changes coming, but I think you're going to like what's going on. So look for that. So if you haven't already subscribed to the Dickheads Podcast YouTube channel or over on SoundCloud, those are the two best places to find more Philip K. Dick content. If this is the first time you've seen me commenting on Philip K. Dick, we do a whole podcast over there. We have 5 years of episodes that we've done about Philip K. Dick and lots of information. But this particular episode was inspired by a conversation that I saw going on Facebook the last couple of days about technology that we're seeing in the real world that Philip K. Dick wrote about in the 50s, 60s, 70s, before his death in 1982. So these are 10 weird technologies that PKD predicted. They're, not one-to-one, because a lot of his versions of it are much weirder. But let's start off with an easy one. In the mid 50s, I think 1956, Philip K. Dick put out a novel called The Man Who Japed. And there was a technology called the Getabout. And the Getabout was a steam-powered car. And that's because in the futuristic society that he was imagining, the man who japed, oil was not available. The Man Who Japed is very much kind of a satire of communist China. And we're going to talk about the Man Who Japed for one of the other technologies coming up a little bit later. But the Getabout, even though it's steam powered and not electric like we have, but these alternate forms of cars that are not run by internal combustion is kind of what I saw the Getabout as being predictive of. So that's your first one, the Getabout from the Man Who Japed. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is 3D printers. And but in PKD, the 3D printers were generally living creatures. But what they did, is exactly 3D printing. They printed objects and items. The creatures were called billetongs in one short story, and in one novel there was a living creature that printed money in the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldridge. But the billetong first appeared in the 1954 short story Hey the Printer, and there's an exact quote that I have here: "Why bother learning to make things when the billetong will happily copy them for you?" And so Pay the Printer was a short story that was collected in The Preserving Machine and in volume 3 of the Best of PKD short stories. But the novel that Billetong appeared in was Now Wait for Last Year. And this was the main thing that produced the items for the Tijuana Fur and Dye Company, which is the company just south of the border here in San Diego that the main characters in the story were using to produce all their products. Was a living creature who basically was 3D printing. So that's it's pretty thoughtful, looking for the idea that something could just print out entire products. So the next one that I have is Elon Musk's idea of the Hyperloop. And this was in he had something called the Shuttle Tube in a outline for a juvenile novel that Philip K. Dick ended up not writing, but he wrote the outline in 1962, and he twice mentions the Shuttle Tube for transportation. And that one's going to be hard for you to find because It's not published. I got it at the Fullerton Archive, but I wrote about it in my upcoming book, Unfinished PKD. So you'll be able to read about it in Unfinished PKD whenever I finish that. But I'm 55,000 words into it, so we'll be done pretty soon, and hopefully we'll have information on where that book's going to be published. But I did think that the shuttle tube sounded an awful like Elon Musk's hyperlink or hyperloop, whatever it was called. I'm sure he abandoned it as soon as he was able to stop California from making the high-speed rail. So boo. Yeah, we want high-speed rail in California. So one of the sad realities of modern warfare is that we have political and war assassinations and war by drone. And that's something that Philip K. Dick imagined in a book that he wrote in 1962 originally. It wasn't published until the 70s, called We Could Build You. And his those were called, and this is very hard to pronounce, encephalotropic floating anti-personnel mines. But in We Can Build You, this was basically drone warfare. And here, and this next one, I'm going to get a little political. So, not everyone's going to appreciate what I have to say about this, but there was a technology that Philip K. Dick talked about originally in a short story called Service Call, and then eventually used this technology to great effect in the novel The Penultimate Truth. And this is called the Swivel. And it's a device that's meant to control the politically correct behavior of citizens. And if you're wondering, like, well, do we have that? Well, I tend to think that when you look at the way the MAGA movement was kind of cajoled into even, all these people went and led an insurrection. There was a woman, Ashley Babbitt, who lived right here in my neighborhood in San Diego, who died because she believed all the misinformation about the election. Now, over 60 judges, including Trump appointed judges, found that there was no election interference, but the behavior of the MAGA people in red hats was pretty much controlled by the way that information was disseminated, and they ended up committing crimes, all because of how their politics and political behavior was swayed and controlled. Now, is Fox News exactly a swivel? No. And the way that the political movements on the right were controlled are not direct one-to-one, like, hey, we're dialing up a certain behavior that should be used. Now, in the story, Service Call, a repairman from the future is just surprised to see that somebody has a swivel-free home. And if you have somebody who, that made me think of somebody who doesn't watch mainstream media, doesn't have any idea what the right or the left are trying to kind of manipulate the population to, kind of an independent thing. Now, I personally believe the problem is worse on the right, but I'm a lefty. So, but if you look at the way that the media manipulated and the former president manipulated people into sedition, and then, by the way, left them to dry, out to dry in the court cases. He raised a bunch of money for his legal defense and didn't help any of those people from the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys. And it's pretty obvious to see that they were politically manipulated into the situation. And so I know some of you are really not going to like to hear that, but I think the Swivel from The Penultimate Truth and Service Call is, very similar in effect to what the Swivel was, just like controlling political behavior. So next I have 3D pictures. So in the novel that was written in 1970 and released in 74, Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, there's a line about 3D pictures, and I think the exact line is, I have it here, these 3D animeds they want on military service papers, they cost me $1,000. So, 3D pictures that were like used on IDs, specifically in military, but the idea of 3D pictures, which, we see all the time now, that you can like turn your pictures on Facebook into, 3D pictures that kind of look that way. But it's just another thing that he talked about. So the next thing is a little more kind of amorphous, but I was thinking about phone Googling and Siri. So like if you go, "Hey Siri, who is Philip K. Dick?" And then, my phone comes up with a Wikipedia page on, who Philip K. Dick was. But, a lot of people, I have an old iPhone, but some people will just say, "Hey Siri, who's Philip K. Dick?" And then, and then the little like glowing light in the side of the room. "Hey Siri, turn on my lights. Hey Siri, do this." But in the novel written in November of 1967, and didn't come out, I believe, till 69, Galactic Popular, which is one of my all-time favorite PKD novels. There's some really great technology, and there's a scene where the main character calls the encyclopedia on his phone to get all the information that he needs. And it's just basically using his phone to look up information, but he has them calling in to to the encyclopedia over the phone. But that's basically the same thing as looking up information on your phone. How many times did we do it? Grab our phone, let me look up that information. And there's the scene, it's on page 24 and 25 of Galactic Popular, where he consults the phone for some information about Sirius 5, the planet that he's going to get this job on. And I just thought that was very similar. In one of the outlines for a novel called The Name of the Game is Death, that he didn't write, that I wrote about in Unfinished PKD, there's a whole thing about that's very similar to the swipe right, swipe left dating that he did in the outline for that. But we'll come back to that because that is next, actually. Phone sex lines and internet porn. Basically, Phil wrote about this in his 1970 novel, Flow My Tears. I mean, he wrote it in 1970. It came out in 74. And in Flow My Tears, the policeman said there's a part on page 153, and I actually have to read from it because it's too long. I didn't want to type it into my notes. And he's talking about the grid, which is a phone-based internet that exists in this book. And by the way, John Shirley, who I'm doing a book tour with here soon, John Shirley in the early 80s wrote a science fiction novel trilogy called The Song Called Youth, Eclipse books, and there's a proto-internet in that called The Grid as well. But anyways, the Grid, Ayla said, "You don't know about about the phone grid?" "No," he admitted, but he had never heard of it. Everybody's sexual aspects are linked electronically and amplified to as much as you can endure. It's addictive because it's electronically enhanced. People, some of them get so deep into it they can't pull out. Their whole lives revolve around the weekly, or hell, even daily, setting up of the network of phone lines. It's regular picture phones you can activate by credit card. So it's free at the time you do it, and the sponsors bill you once a month. And if you don't, they cut your phone off the grid. So here's the thing. There was a time in the 80s and 90s when you could call phone lines for phone sex. And now you have OnlyFans, and you have what are called chat girls, and you have all this kind of internet. Like, I don't know much about it. I'm married and kind of square, but a lot of these things that he was talking about in Flow My Tears are things that have come true. And he was writing about it at the time, which is really ahead of the time. So the next real life technology that I think Phil predicted not once but twice is the CCTV cameras and facial recognition. Now, England's been known for using the CCTV security cameras. Lots of nations around the world use them, but China uses has cameras everywhere and facial recognition software that basically keeps their population in line, which, by the way, Philip K. Dick wrote about in his 1956 novel. I believe it was 56. It was either 55 or 56. The Man Who Japed. And The Man Who Japed is exactly a satire of communist China in the 50s and what Philip K. Dick saw as where communist China was going to go. And there's a technology in that book called the juveniles. And the juveniles watch over all the people, monitors all the people, and reports their behavior to the MOREC, which is like the neighborhood moral reclamation council. So they like oversee the morals of the neighborhood. And then they have regular meetings to make sure that people in the neighborhoods are following these morality rules. The Man Who Japed is kind of a lost Philip K. Dick book. It's not considered one of the classics, but dude, it is great. The Man Who Japed is highly underrated. And, he was on to something talking about, he obviously foresaw a lot of what China was doing. Now, Phil returned to these themes again in a book he wrote in the late 60s called Our Friends from Frolics 8. Our Friends from Frolics 8. And there's, it's not considered one of Phil's best, but I like this book a lot. And there's a really, really creepy, really underrated scene and it's on page 110 and 111 of the Mariner edition. And it's a scene where one of the characters gets a glimpse into what's called the Peep room. And this is like basically the control center for what would be the CCTV security and camera system. And this, he gets to see like all the people of the earth, like kind of in this fishbowl, like look in this room full of TVs. And it's a really creepy scene. And I just wanted to put that out there, that's a really great time that he dealt with these issues of CTV and facial recognition. So there's certain terms that you hear over and over and over again in Philip K. Dick's books. If you read them all the time, like con app for the kind of combination condominium and apartment, or but one of the other ones is a homeopath. And a homeopath is the futuristic newspaper in Philip K. Dick land. And what it really he gets a lot of things wrong with about how we do news these days. But one thing he got right is how the algorithm on the internet kind of feeds us the news we want to see. Now, he uses homeopaths in practically everything. So, like almost every book that you read, there that's set in the future, there's homeopaths. But the best kind of explanation of how a homeopath works is in Ubik, and it's on pages 18 through 20. And but what the homeopath, how it works in Ubik is you rent a homeopath machine, you put a coin in, and it spits out the news it thinks you want to be exposed to. Like what, it's learned what kind of news you like. And so one of the characters in Ubik basically says like, oh, that's just a bunch of gossip. When he gets the headline, the headlines when the homeopath spits out the news, and his friend says, well, why don't you set the dial for low gossip? So you can, set the dial for, I guess less gossipy news. And if you want like happy news or sad news, you can do that. And one of the things about the way that we get news today is that a lot of times we get it through our social media platforms, through Facebook and Twitter, and the algorithm kind of feeds us like, especially like for me on YouTube, like if there's a new Metallica song, like YouTube knows I want to hear it. And so or especially new Earth Crisis stuff, like always ends up in my feed every time they play a show and somebody shoots a cell phone video. Because I've watched so many Earth Crisis videos, they all come to me instantly. And because I watched, like, for example, a lot of commentary by the Young Turks, like pretty much every time they put out a new video, it comes to me. And so that's kind of how the Homeopath works. And he nailed that in 1966 when he turned in Ubik. I know it didn't come out for a couple of years, but I always think of books about when they were written, not when they were released, when it comes to Philip K. Dick. And then, but the big one, the number one, is Chat GPT. And in the penultimate truth, in the very first chapter of the book, is a scene where a character is using a device to write a speech for him, for the president, called it's and I have a hard time saying this. It's like rhetoric, the rhetorizer, a rhetorizer. I don't know how to say it. Anyways, but that's basically Chat GPT learning how to write the speech for him. And that was kind of the device that started this conversation on Facebook, where we were talking about times where he nailed it. And if you read that first chapter of Penultimate Truth, it really nails like kind of the issues that we have going on with Chat GPT and this character who's writing a speech through artificial intelligence. And there's also in the Divine Invasion, there's an AI system that they call the Big Noodle, which I think is very funny. A lot of people just like refer to it as the Big Noodle in the book, which I thought was hilarious. So now there's lots of technology that he talks about that I kind of want to give honorable mentions to because they haven't happened yet. And we never got the rapid hover blimps that Phil was talking about in Galactic Pot Healer. And that book has all kinds of funny stuff. Like the main character lives in Cleveland, and his apartment building has a giant 3D projection of the coastline of California on the building next to it. So when you look out your window, it looks like you're looking at the ocean, which is great. And he also has a mood stabilizing bed. He has basically a smart bed. It keeps track of his weight. It has a dream projector that has a lever. It also has a sex lever for, I guess, helping out with that stuff. And and then one piece of advice the main character gives is never argue with an angry bed. So that's Galactic Pot Healer. And this one's hard to say, but in Scanner Darkly, there's a cephalochromoscope, which basically functions the same as the mood organ from We Can Build You and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is a device where you can dial how you want to feel, and it will automatically make you feel that way, which and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep leads to there's a really funny scene where Deckard and his wife are arguing, and he gets mad because she keeps setting it for angrier. Like she does it on purpose, like during their argument, which I know would be, I think, a particular fear of Phil's. And then in the Penultimate Truth, there's a Flapple fruit fly car, which is another one that John Shirley did in his second novel, Transmaniacon. He had a fly car, which was really cool. And and then in the Simulacra, there's Looney Luke's discount spaceships. We don't have discount spaceships yet. We really wish we did. But anyways, so those are technologies that Phil K. Dick got right. So here's the thing. I only thought about this for a little bit. So if I did a little bit more intense research, maybe would have thought of some other ones. I mean, there's hundreds more. So what did I miss? Put in the comments down below so you can like and subscribe, like this video, subscribe to my channel. Also subscribe to Dickheads. And if you're new to my Philip K. Dick content, go to the Dickheads YouTube page and you'll find episodes. I'm particularly proud of the episode on Scanner Darkly. And I mentioned John Shirley twice, and he was on that episode with us for Scanner Darkly. Three Stigmata episode's really good. Eye in the Sky, very good episode. I feel real proud of. But you're kind of going on a journey with me if you go back through that, because I didn't, I've been learning Philip K. Dick as we do this. So anyways, cool stuff. So as we like to say, the Dickheads podcast, keep it paranoid, stay paranoid.